Welcome back, guys! Today I'm going to be reading chapter 8 through chapter 10. Chapter 8, The Pine Cone. If you stand in a forest long enough, eventually something will fall on you. And Ross had been standing in the forest long enough. A gentle wind whispered through the treetops, and then thunk! A pine cone bounced off her head. The robot looked down and watched the pine cone roll to a stop. It seemed harmless, so Roz went right back to doing nothing. A few hours later, a gust of wind rushed through the treetops, and then thunk! The robot looked down as another pine cone rolled away. And then a few hours after that, a howling wind soared through the treetops. It bent trunks and shook branches. And then thunk, thunk, thunk. Pine cones began raining down. Thunk, thunk. Ross felt something like annoyance. Thunk. She quickly scanned the area for something safe from the pine cones. And she spotted the perfect place when she looked up at a huge rocky shape that towered above the forest. Chapter 9. The Mountain. Roz was now stomping her way up to the mountain. Dense forest and rocky outcrops forced the robot to zig and zag and backtrack, but after an hour of steady hiking, she arrived at the craggy mountain peak. Grasses and flowers and shrubs sprouted everywhere. Pockets of soil, but there was no trees at the top. Roz was safe from those annoying pine cones. She dusted herself off and then carefully climbed up a reeling slab of stone to the very highest point of the entire mountain. The robot slowly turned her head completely around and saw the ocean stretching to the horizon in every direction. And in that moment, Roz learned what you and I have known since the beginning of the story. In that moment, Roz felt it, finally realizing that she was on an island. Roz looked down and survived the island scarring. From the sandy southern point, the island grew wider and greater and hiller until it finally jutted up into the rocky cone of the mountain. In some places, the mountain fell away, leaving sheer cliffs of waterfalls rushed off one cliff and fed a river that wound its way through a great meadow. In the center of the island, the river flowed past wildflowers and ponds and boulders and then disappeared into the forest. Blurry shapes suddenly cut through the robot vision. She refocused her eyes and saw vultures circling above the foothills. Then she noticed lizards warming themselves on a distant rock. A badger peeked out from a berry bush. A moose waved through a stream. A flock of boars turned into perfect unseen above the trees. The island was teeming with life. And now it had a new kind of life. A strange kind of life. Artificial life. Instead of doing 8 through 10 of chapters, I'm going to do 8 through 13. Okay, chapter 10, the remainder. I should remind you, reader, that Roz had no idea how she had come to be on that island. She didn't know that she'd been built in a factory and then stored stored it in a warehouse before crossing the ocean on a cargo ship. She didn't know that a hurricane had sunk the ship and left her crate floating on the waves for days, till it finally washed her free at shore. She didn't know that she'd been accidentally activated by those creatures' curious sea eyes. As the robot looked out at the island, it never ever even occurred to her that she might belong there. As far as Roz knew, she was home. Chapter 3. The Robot Sleeps. Roz stood on the peak and watched the sun sink behind the ocean. She watched shadows slowly spread over the island, and up the mountainside she watched the stars come out, one by one, until the sky was filled with million points of light. It was the first night of the robot life. She activated her headlights, and suddenly a bright shaft of the light were beaming out from her eyes and illuminated the whole mountain top. Too bright, so she deemed them. Then she turned off and sat in the darkness and listened to the birds of nighttime chirp. After a while, a robot computer brain decided it was a good time to conserve energy. So she sat and enjoyed her hands to a rock. Her nonsense robot switched off, and then, in her own way, the robot slept. Chapter 12. The Storm. Roz felt safe up on the mountain top, so she spent the next few days and nights perched on the peak. But everything changed one afternoon, when a low-flying cloud crept up the mountain and Roz found herself surrounded by white when the world faded back into view. She noticed more clouds floating south past the island. Then she heard a deep rumble behind her. The robot turned her head around and saw that the sky was filled with a swirling wall of darkness. Light flickered here and there. More deep rumbles. A storm was approaching, and it wasn't just any storm. It was a fierce as the ones that had sent the cargo ship to the ocean floor. The wind picked up, and the first drop of rain tapped against the warehouse. It was time to go. Roz unclammed her hands and began sliding down the peak. Hot sparks flew from where her body scraped against the leaning slab of stone. As soon as her feet hit soil, she was off running. The rain fell harder. The wind blew faster. The lightning flashed brighter. The thunder cracked louder. So much rainwater was falling that rushing rivers of the runoff started springing up everywhere. Roz flashed down the mountains, searching through the gloom for any kind of shelter, but she should have watched where she was going. Her heavy feet slipped and tripped, and she stumbled right into a mudslide. Our robot was helpless. The river of mud whisked her downhill, slamming her into rocks and dragging her through the bushes and sweeping her straight toward a cliff. Mud was pouring off the cliff like a waterfall. Roz frantically clawed at the ground, grasping for anything she could hold on to, but the flow overturned her fast towards the edge. And just as she was about to jump over the side, she came to a hard, sudden stop. Mud surged around her, spraying into her face and tying her against some solid thing. She blindly felt with her hands and recognized the thick roots in a trunk of a pine tree. In an instant, she was pulling herself up into the branches. The wind whipped across the mountainside, and Roz heard the familiar thump of pine cones pelting her body, but she didn't mind them. She was just happy to be safe from the mud flow. The robot locked her arms and legs around the tree and waited for the storm to blow away. Chapter 13. The Aftermath. Daybreak, and the storm had passed, but sounds of water were everywhere. The air was filled with dripping sounds of melting rock and the sloshing sounds of flooded streams. And then came a very different sound. It was clanging sound made when a robot slipped on a wet rock. There was quite a few planes that morning. As Roz worked her way downhill, she scanned the aftermath of the storm. Giant mounds of mud and debris had formed below the cliff. The island Sidra River had creased the banks and spilled into the nearby fields. Nearby fields and forests. Some trees had been uprooted, others were submerged. There appeared branches barely poking above the floodwaters. Their lower branches swarming with fish instead of birds. After such a storm, you might expect to see animals, of course, scattered among all the devastation, but animals seemed to have survived just fine. Somehow, they had known the storm was coming, and they had found shelter long before it rolled in. Lowland creatures who had salt refuge and higher ground were waiting patiently for the water to recede. Deer was wading through the flooded fields. Beavers were busily collecting a trail of falling branches. Geese honked in the sky before splashing down into a watershed of force. Clearly the animals were experts at surviving.